Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Fathering Project, and thank you for being with us tonight. This month at the Fathering Channel, we are looking at resilience, and tonight we're very thrilled to have with us Dr. Mandie Shean, who's a lecturer and researcher at Edith Cowan University in WA. Tonight's subject will be on resilience and how to do well when life is challenging. Now, before we get started tonight, I'd like to take you through a few housekeeping rules. You will see on the side of your panel, there is a chat box. Now, anytime that you have a question through the night, please don't hesitate to send the question to us. You can pop the question in, press send, and after the webinar, which will run for about 30 minutes, we will go to an open session for about 30 minutes with questions, and we really welcome your questions across the webinar. The second thing I'd like to bring to your attention, and it's a question we often get, is how do we make the presenter slide bigger? So if you can see, there is a bar that sits across the top 3/4 to the top of your screen. If you take your cursor and you pull that screen down, you can actually change the size of the presenter box. So you can adjust it to the scope that you would like, and we hope you enjoy the webinar. Now, just to give you a little bit of information about Dr. Mandie Shean. Mandie is a senior lecturer and a researcher at Edith Cowan University. She's a member of the Australian Psychological Association, and her research interests include resilience, well-being, behaviour, and memory. Dr. Mandie Shean attained a doctorate of philosophy at Edith Cowan University in 2011, a Bachelor of Arts Psychology with first-class honours at Edith Cowan University, and in 2005, a Bachelor of Arts in Education and Primary Education at Edith Cowan University in 1991. Tremendous record of achievements there so soon in one's life. We're very thrilled to have her with us tonight to share with us information on resilience and to help us understand as parents how we can do well when life is challenging and how we can help our children to become more resilient. Thank you very much and enjoy the webinar.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining me, and thank you to Liz for the invitation. It's always my privilege to be able to speak into people's lives and encourage you. And even though I am a researcher, and this is all based on my PhD and other research, I've tried to make it really practical for you so you have things to take away rather than simply me giving you theory. As it is, I've just written a book on all of this, so the 30 minutes, sort of 35 minutes is only just a taste of this. So if you need any more information, you're welcome to contact me and I can send you some more. So I've just tried to get the absolute essence of what I thought would help you the most. So to start off with, resilience is doing better than expected after experiencing risk. So it's better than expected. So I may have crashed the car, and instead of deciding I'll never drive again and staying home being depressed, better than expected might be that I go get more driving lessons, I save money and I buy a new car. And so what we're wanting for our lives is not perfect. And I feel like sometimes the happiness movement, even though happiness is important, has made us feel like we should be perfect. But that's not resilience. Resilience is going through normal challenge. And sometimes we look at other people and think, well, they don't have challenge, but I can assure you they do. And what you have to do is look at your own life and say, can I do better than expected in this situation? The other thing with resilience is that you aren't born with it. You aren't born with a superpower that, makes you invulnerable to things. That's what they thought in the 60s. It's something we learn and we get better at as we go along. So what I want to do is show you some skills and some knowledge and some beliefs that will help you and your child to be resilient. Before we get started, I just want to give you a quick overview, because you'll see this all of the time, these sort of shopping lists of skills that people need. And these are all really important, but what researchers were trying to do is work out, okay, what are the problems that people face that cause them to not be resilient? And what are the things that might save them? So let's just say I've got high intelligence, so that will help me be resilient. But what they found is there is no magic bullet. There is nothing particular to anyone who will that will save them from like high risk. And a great example, and why I chose to do resilience, is I remember being at a group once and they were talking about single parent families and low socioeconomic families. And I said, oh, wait a minute, that's me. Like, I come from a single parent family and we were really poor growing up. And they said to me, but you're different. And I said, well, why am I different? And nobody could answer it. And it made me walk away and think, why do some people, even though you don't have the odds stacked for you, you seem to have them against you, seem to make it, which is the basis of my PhD. So I interviewed adolescents who had been through serious risk and asked them, what changed your life? And this is what this is all is based on. One of the problems that I'm finding at the moment, and what you might hear is the cotton wool generation, is that what we're starting to see is everything is classified as a risk. And even during this COVID time, I've heard people at work say things like, you know, the young people are traumatized because they can't go to school and they can't play with their friends. And I was like, oh, hang on a little minute. That's not traumatizing. Traumatizing is, you know, losing your family members, dying from COVID. And we talk about things that are normal and a good challenge as a bad thing. So we need to change some of the language around what is a risk. And, you know, when we overprotect young people, what we're basically doing is saying to them, you are incapable of coping with this, so I'm going to remove it from you or I'll cope for you. And that's a really dangerous position to be in, because what you're doing is undermining their ability to cope, but more importantly, you're undermining their ability to trust themselves. You know, like if mum or dad rushes in and saves them every time or takes the challenge away, then they don't think they're capable of facing it. And so I asked myself, is it threatening my safety? Am I at risk? Is this dangerous? And sometimes I feel like, sometimes I might have a lecture of 300 and I don't want to do it. I feel a bit nervous, but I'm not unsafe. And so I try to make myself step up. And the thing with challenge is you can only know with yourself and your own children is that there are times to push people into the challenge. So you can do it, you should do it, and there's time to step back. And I can't tell you what that is. But I can tell you that every time we step away from a challenge that's a good one, we're less likely to step up to the next one. And our world just gets really, really small. So the answer for resilience is not to remove normal challenge. We don't want young people doing risky things, dangerous things, but we do want them to be ready to cope as they become adolescents and adults. I've come up with a couple of analogies just to bring it all together and simplify it a little bit. So talking about a backpack is all the risks you face. So for me in my backpack, I might have parents, conflict, separating, things like that in there. And what I've started to realize is that what we do is we carry around past hurts, challenges, and risks, and they become heavy. So no matter what resources I try and give you tonight, if you're carrying around things from the past, what happens is it holds you back. And when things come from a risk, when they come from the hurt, we don't always respond in a really thoughtful way. So it's really easy to fold things up. You know, my boss might be bullying me or someone's ignoring me, one of my friends, and I might just fold it up and put it in the backpack and ignore it. And, you know, that's a really simple way of dealing with risk and challenge. But the more we fold things up and the more we store them in there, the heavier that gets. And I'll show you some ways later on how we can manage some of those things. The second idea I have, which is like your protective factors, but not necessarily, is your bucket. So these are the things that you have gathered along the way, your resources. Now, not all the resources you've gathered along the way through life are helpful. You need to make sure that you challenge what's in there. And so when I look in my bucket of what I have, I think about things like I've got a great mum and I've got a really lovely family. I had a great neighborhood in Balcatta to grow up in. And so I'm really lucky to have some really positive things in my life. What we tend to do is we'll look at other people and think, well, I don't know why you're behaving that way. You know, it seems like I would do this. Why aren't you doing that? But everyone has grown up with different experiences. And what you have to do is, rather than think, I wish I was like this, you got to think, what am I missing? What didn't I pick up along the way? And one really, like, there's so many things like emotional regulation. So being able to self-control. That's not born with, that's learned. So if you have trouble with self-control, that's not something that you just go, oh, well, never mind, I can't do it. It's like, okay, I need to work on this. Some people don't have great social skills. Again, that's something you can work on and you can add it. So rather than getting mad at yourself or your child because they don't seem to be able to master something, I try to think about when I'm working with kids is, what do I need to put in their bucket? Because disciplining someone for doing the wrong thing is one way of approaching a problem, but usually they will, if we reteach it, it's a much better strategy. So I'm going to show you just 5 quick ways to fill your bucket. I'll go fast through there. Take care of your physical health. Now, these things, I don't even need to have them on the slide. I was double checking whether I should even put them in there. They're so obvious and you would have heard them 100 times. And I should have number 6 is exercise. But the thing is, we don't do it. And these are really basic things that keep our body functioning. And just the one point I want to make here is physical health affects mental health and your capacity to cope. So if you get up in the morning and you drink 3 coffees, you feel irritable, you're anxious, and you can't focus, it's not a psychological problem. And sometimes what we're doing is we're living unhealthily and we're feeling depressed or we're feeling anxious or we're feeling out of control, but it's actually a physical problem. So make sure you take care of your physical health and then work from there. The core of my research, I said to them, there was no research like this. What we knew was that list of factors I showed you was what made you change your life. So why did you decide to be resilient? Why did you overcome the things? And every single one of my participants said, when I decided I was worth it. So then I started to probe a little bit and ask them, well, what does that mean? And they said, I decided that my life was worthwhile, that I had value. And the really important part here is that you matter. Like, you matter, your child matters for no reason. And it's not because you got the job interview or because you got the promotion or you drive the flashy car or they got an A grade. You know, those are things that are nice additives to life. But having someone in your life that believes you matter and that accepts you for no reason is one of the core reasons people can overcome things. It's almost like this stake in the ground that, and for me, it's always been my mother, is I go back to that and I think I've got that firm ground that I know that she knows that, like, she values me, which is really important. The idea, think about a car, like, you've got this Jaguar, you go out, you polish it, you love it, you vacuum it, you park it in the shade, and it's valuable, so you invest in it. But maybe you've got, and apologies if you have an old Hyundai 1985, and it's rusty and it's not worth anything, and you don't put any effort into it. And it's the same with your young person, and it's the same with you. When you start to value you or them, people want to invest in themselves. And I've seen this with so many clients. Once they get the revelation, like, I'm worth something, like I do have value, they start to chase down things and start to try to fill the bucket themselves. The problem with value is we get it from the wrong place in our society. So young people are getting it from social media. It's like, how many likes did I get? And who commented on my picture? And how many friends? And do I have the right sneakers? And one of the groups I work with, one of the Year 6 boys said, the thing with using clothes or things is once I take my sneakers off, I'm no longer valuable. And I thought that was a really beautiful way of remembering that value has to be on really healthy things. And I'll show you a couple coming up in the next few slides. So one of them is liking yourself. And we all have this massive range, and your kids will have this massive range of who they are. They will be loud, funny, quiet, a little quirky in different things. And I found that if you can love, and the kids said to me in my interviews, if you love the individual, you love who I am and you see me and you accept that, then I feel valued. And so rather than trying to get this beige version of everyone, I love seeking out things. Like when I drive to work, I think, what good can I find in people? And I ask the teachers to be treasure hunters. Go look for good. It's so easy to find fault in your children and fault in yourself. But go find good, because that is a good place to build strength and build the relationship with your child and with yourself. There's heaps more there, but I'm gonna run out of time very quickly. So build appropriate connections. In my life, I'm on a few boards. I lecture about 1,000 students in a week. I can run into 2,000 people. Not literally run into, but social connections are so important to us. They give us encouragement, love, they give us kindness, acceptance, and so on, support. But what I was doing was trying to connect with everybody. And one time I was talking to my friend and I said, oh, there's 2 students at university that don't like me. And they said to me, do you really expect all 1,000 of them to like you? And I said, yes, of course I do. And they said, that's the most ridiculous thing I've heard. And then after I said it, I thought, yes, that is a ridiculous thing as well. So what I teach young people, and it works brilliantly, I usually draw it, but I can't here, is we have inner space and outer space. So inner space is about 5 people that we share with, that can speak into our life, that can just talk about, things we need to improve on. They're unconditional. And then outer space is everyone else. So it might be people I play volleyball with, people I work with, and I might have coffee with. So they're friends, but they don't have the same kind of close impact on my life. They're not allowed to. And I kind of imagine it like sometimes arrows fly, but I've got kind of this, and this works for kids too. It's like I've got this force field, and they don't have a right. They're not in my mind. They're not in my inner circle. They're not in my inner space, and they don't have a right to have that sort of say in my life. And it really helps me to be a lot more stable with lots and lots of connections that you have. Second thing with appropriate connections, especially with your children and your wife or your partner or whoever it might be, is to be intentional. Sometimes we want relationships and we miss them, but we don't put them first and we don't set time aside. If you really want something, you have to make time for it. So take your daughter on a date, take your son on a boy date, like pizza, basketball, whatever is their thing. Ask them, what would you like to do? Let's set some time aside. Because it's those shared experiences that kids come back to and use as something that, yeah, Dad cares about me. I know I matter because he did this. So make sure you prioritize them if they matter to you. Not everyone's great at relationships. Again, we're not born good at relationships. So go invest, go get a book, Bolton's book, People Skills, or Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Go develop some of those things in you, because like for me personally, I'm super shy, and it's something I am working on, I reflect on, I get feedback on different parts of, how to make small talk is not one of my strengths. I'm very task oriented, but it's okay. You're not meant to be perfect. You can work on it. Now, mastery is a really relevant one if you've got young people who are at school. So mastery contributes to work because there's a sense of I have control over things. I can create something. I can learn. I am capable. And so with mastery, the biggest thing here, the only thing I really want to highlight is that it takes failure. And we're not very good at having failure in our life. And it's funny because I say this, and then the other day I made a large error and I was mad at myself like all day. And then I sort of laughed and I was thinking, well, of course, because you're doing something new, you will make mistakes. It's actually normal, and you need to give yourself a pass out here too. So I'm not talking about failure where you've not tried or you don't care or, you're being sloppy. I'm talking about having a go and not getting it right the first time. So there was one parent I was working with, a daughter who had major psychological issues, she's grade 3. And she was just desperate for her mother's attention. And I said to her, you know, why don't you just, and Mum said, I'm too busy. I'm just too busy. And again, prioritize the things that are important to you. And I said to her, well, what about if she helps you cook dinner? You know, maybe you could do that. And she said, oh, no, like, you should see my house. It's perfect. There's not even one bit of lint on my mat. And I said to her, would you be proud of your mat in 10 years, or will you be proud of your daughter? And she just said to me, oh my goodness, I cannot believe what I just said. And it was just a revelation that we try and sometimes have these tidy, perfect lives, but that's not living. Like, living means that we have to take chances and we will make mistakes. And it's about debriefing, reflecting. You forgot your homework. Oh, well, I didn't save you. I didn't bring it to the school. What do we do next time? It's not necessarily discipline, it's reteaching. I've had kids in year 7 who are functioning at a year 2 level, and the pride they feel when they master something, even at that level. It doesn't matter what level you're at, it's having your own journey. So, side point, don't compare your kids to each other. They don't need that. Coping is another thing we are not born with. My coping skills really started with avoidance, followed by avoidance, and then avoidance. So my backpack was probably chock-a-blocks. My strongest memory is in grade 5 of not handing in a train assignment because I didn't have anything to write it with, and I just avoided it for like 6 months. I've had to learn that that's a very annoying picture, but that's not the way to do it. And so I'm going to go forward. I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to talk about coping while that's not flashing around. 2 things. Feelings are good. And I was just talking to someone at the park, and it's like, you know, it's so important as men and as young people and families to know that you've got to feel things. So a feeling is fine. And what I say to young people, you don't want to set up a house and live there in the feelings. You want to set up a tent. So sit there with your child, sit there and by yourself, go and sit there and feel it and think it and go through it, and then move on. And then the feeling will come back again, and you might need to process a little bit more. But the key thing with coping is that you need to feel things before you think about things. So thinking doesn't work when your feelings are elevated. And so if your child's frustrated and upset and angry, this is what I used to say, I need to talk to you right now. But they can't because their feelings are overwhelming. So make sure that you let the feelings pass and then go on and do the talking afterwards. Coping, if you don't know how to cope in effective ways, go read on it. Things like write a list, pick the best part of the list, think about the outcomes of, you know, what might happen. So problem-focused coping is a skill that we need to develop as well. And that's not something that kids do naturally, and they need you to scaffold through what might happen potentially. Another part of filling your bucket is practicing gratitude. So this is so much research around this. It's changing your focus from what's going wrong in your life to thinking about what's going right. So each day thinking about 5 things. You can read, there's so much online about gratitude. It's one of the most helpful things you can do. But grace is about sometimes letting the stuff out of our backpack. So the grudges, the things that make us angry, our past that's holding us back. So let me take you through that. So the past keeps us stuck. So I had a friend say to me recently, I'm just an angry person. And I said to them, you don't say that to a psychologist. I said, no, you're not. I said, you're angry because, and I know what's happened in their past, but what they'd done was fold it up and put it in their backpack. And that drives your behavior. So you think, well, I'm not thinking about it. That's the past. But the past lives well and truly in us until we rip it out and get rid of it. So you might feel like, you know, my brother told me I was useless when I was young. This is not true for me. And now I run a large company, but I never feel good enough. It like lingers like this bad smell. So we don't want old risks to drive our future. So what do we do with them? What do we do with the things? Number 1 is you acknowledge. And what you do is when things go wrong, so when you get upset, something makes you angry or frustrated, think, okay, what's going on here? What am I feeling and why am I bothered by this? Because if you don't manage it, if you just fold it up and put it away, then you won't be able to recognize it and overcome it and be resilient. So take the time and space you need to process things that have happened. Last year, something really bad happened or difficult for me at the beginning of second semester, and I didn't have time to deal with it at that point. So I folded it up and put it in my backpack, and I got it out in January. So it wasn't that I'm not going to deal with it ever. It was that I know now's not a good time. At the moment, there's a lot going on with COVID and changes. So it doesn't mean that, you have to go back and pull out your past and go through it now. But it might be that you start to think about some things that may be affecting you and the way you parent. So then don't start stuffing more stuff in as you start to deal with things. The things that I'm starting to see in myself is that when things happen and I feel my feelings are my flag. So you're like, okay, I'm annoyed at such and such. I feel uncomfortable, I'm angry, I'm resentful. It's like, what's that triggering in me? Because what you need to do is change the pattern of your life. And you start, these patterns just are automatic. And you're like, I'm always going to fail. I'm always going to do this. I'm always going to like have arguments with such and such. You always are if you don't address why that's happening. So take a step back and have a think about, okay, why is this happening? What can I do differently? Do I need to add something to my bucket to change my strength? It's really easy to blame other people. Yes, your boss, your mother, your brother, your sister, or your dog may have caused the problem today for you even, but it's our responsibility. And I'm not saying you need to forgive and forget. Forgiveness is a really powerful thing to let go, but it is up to you with what you do with it now. And the unforgiveness shoved into your backpack is one of the biggest things that makes people stuck. And if you don't somehow process what happened, again, you don't have to let them back in your life or anything, but holding on to that sort of toxic poison of unforgiveness will keep you stuck there. Resilient people are ones that say, it might not be okay what you did, but I'm not going to be a victim to what you did. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to have the life that I want and not be party to what your decisions were. The other one is don't put other people's things in your backpack. So this is particularly for parents, is that your child's problems are not yours. And it's really easy to carry the things and try and be responsible for them, but it's not your burden to bear. And there's really great research showing that when you try to carry other people's burdens, you actually burn out, because we're actually made quite well to carry our own problems and solve our own problems. And one of the parents I was working with, she's like, it just seems so mean to not fix everything for my child and hold all that. And I said to her, it's actually mean to do it because A, you're going to burn out, but B, they're not responsible for their lives. And always thinking about, all right, so what do we want our young people to be as an adult? And what do I need to do to make sure that I'm creating an adult here that can rely on themselves, that can trust themselves? So while they're not your problem, you might take them through steps on how to process it. So one of the things is like you'll see a young person come in and they'll be so angry. And my first response would be, well, that's wrong. You shouldn't be angry. And they talk about positive emotions and negative emotions. And I think that's wrong in itself as well. Like all emotions are there to teach us that we've got a reaction to something. So it's like, all right, don't discipline don't encourage them to like smash holes in things. There's behaviors that go with emotions as well, but it's quite okay. Anger is fine. Why do you feel angry? What's going on? Talk me through it. What happened? Why did you feel like that? And then help them unpack that. So you're scaffolding them, but you're not taking that off them. All right, so what does this mean for you as a father or a mother if you're listening on the side? You need to look after yourself before you look after your children. As a teacher, I just found that if I'm in a bad space, I have nothing to give. And my bucket of resources, if I've got avoidance in my bucket as my coping strategy, then that's what I'm going to pull out and give to my children and to the people that I'm working with. So I've got to add to what I know, and I've got to challenge myself when I've got faulty thinking and faulty responses to stuff. But you've also got to like decide that you are worth it. And what I see is people, adults who don't look after themselves, who don't care for themselves, who let people walk all over them and don't value yourself. Like, you are a unique person who is made the way you are. And it's like, you need to like grab hold of that in your own mind, not because people tell you you are, not because I tell you necessarily, not because you're brilliant at anything, just because you are. When you get a grip of your own value, it's much easier to start to give it away. And what I see when I see kids that are bullying, or I see adults that are bullying, I see someone with really low self-worth. And what they're trying to do is, I'm going to make you worse than me because I feel so rubbish about myself. And like, that's just I feel sorry for them. It's a faulty way to go. So invest in yourself, have good boundaries, keep learning yourself, keep really solid relationships outside of the children and your family, and make sure that you are filling your bucket with things that maybe you didn't get when you were growing up. Your past and your present will drive your parenting, even if you don't acknowledge it. So thinking about one of the really cool things that comes through is we are all looking for validation. And rejection in childhood is one of the biggest problems across the board for where I see like really people that are non-resilient. And it's like we're constantly seeking the validation we didn't get when we were a child. Now, when I say validation, I don't mean you say to your child that everything they do is perfect. That's the worst self-esteem movement in the world. It's like, I did this really dumb drawing, and it's like, well, that's amazing. You're the most amazing. I'm not saying that. You're not validating things they do. You're validating them. And it might be, you know what? You've done the wrong thing here, but I want you to know that I love you, and that's never going to change. And maybe you didn't get that, but you can give that to your child, and you can give that to yourself. Manage challenges in the family by facing them. So maybe you sit around the dinner table and you talk things through. People don't walk off and slam doors, and if they do, they've got to come back and you got to sit through and talk when you're ready. We don't have to go through every single problem in detail, but when you've got things going along where people are not coping and not managing, and you can see that your child doesn't have a system for sorting things through, then work out a way. One of the really good strategies, particularly with boys, is playing basketball with them, or going for a walk, or going for a drive. For some reason, or I used to roll out a bit of IKEA paper, a big roll of it, and draw at the same time with girls. For some reason, not making eye contact and talking through things can be a really helpful way. So think about, what can I do to increase my protective factors? How can I invest in my family, my relationships, having good boundaries, having good relationships? And then those things, when you fill your bucket and start to deal with some of the issues and challenges as they come up, you'll start to see that you can be resilient as a family. Go, very short version of my 100,000 word thesis.
Thanks, Mandie. That was fabulous. And it's a big, big, broad area, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've got some really good questions coming through. Maybe I might just ask you, the Fathering Project, this is a question from me to you, Mandie. The Fathering Project have a little acronym that we use called BUS. It's called Being There, Unconditional Love and Specialness. Being there is that you're there for your child and give them, you're there all the time. Unconditional love is you love them irrespective of performance and behavior. And S is specialness. You find the specialness in your child and you nurture that. I think that comes through in a few of the concepts that you're developing and providing to the group today.
Yeah, the specialness. I remember this child I was teaching while I was doing my research, and he was just a clown. He was so annoying. And I was doing this, but I said to him, you know, you could be funny. And I tried to teach him, you know, timing, content of the joke. And I said, I'll give you a quiet thumbs up or thumbs down if you get it right. And the first time, because he was interrupting me in the class, he did it right. And then everyone laughed, and this kid flourished. Like, his mum came in and said, what have you done with him? And I think it was the specialness, like, instead of, you know, when your kids do things wrong, instead of like just disciplining it, stop being silly, like sort of embrace it and think, can I work with this and love this as well?
Great, thanks. This is a question from Scott. My son who is 18, has severe social anxiety and never leaves our house. He plays Xbox to communicate and won't join in normal activities. What do we do as parents to help him?
Okay, so I'm assuming, Scott, that you have a psychologist on board here?
There's no reference to that at all, but that may be one of the recommendations that you provide.
Absolutely, and I don't like giving advice that's alternate to that. One of the things with mastery and anxiety is the best therapy, and I just read an article on this, is exposure. And it's hard to get them from that really far away place from where you want them to be, but really gradual steps of exposure are the most effective. But if he's really severe, I would definitely do it with a psychologist. So it might be that he has to say a couple of words to greet you in the morning. And then it just builds up over time, that it maybe a close family friend comes over and he has to say a couple of words to them. And so eventually you just stretch it back. Anxiety, I see this in the older generation. The more older people get scared and stay home, their anxiety increases. And it's like, we've got to be so careful. When you see kids' worlds getting small, just act as soon as you can.
Okay. Here's one from Paul. He'd just like you to expand. Can you come back to the number of likes on Instagram versus building a deeper sense of I matter and I'm likable and I can build friendships without measuring the number of likes? This seems relevant to year 7s.
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole Instagram and the, you know, feeling good about yourself concept.
Yeah. What we do as humans is when we have faulty, like when we have poor connections and poor source of worth, we look for a cheap fix. And it's really interesting because over the years, I've noticed that when I get overly concerned that my students don't like me, it's like that's what I said to you, go back to your behavior. That's my red flag that I've let some of my relationships go and I'm not looking after myself, because those things become really important. So I'd really encourage, so there's 5 sources of worth: boundaries, so putting boundaries on them having their self boundaries, relationships, mastery, existence, like your birthday, thinking I'm alive, I've made it. And one of the ones I haven't talked about tonight is purpose. So getting them to help other people and be invested in others is one of the most amazing, powerful ways of being resilient as well. And I would talk to them about, what do you use to decide that you're worth something? Because we all do it, but you've got to challenge it. And I think kids are pretty good, like if they become aware of it, like it's a fun thing to do, but once you see yourself slipping into that, maybe you need some boundaries about how much you're using it. And but it's when you don't have real life, enough real life positive exposure to relationships, and you start over relying on that, that's when it becomes the biggest problem.
This is from Gunter. Is building resilience for girls very different from building resilience for boys? We have a boy and a girl and they seem to handle things differently. Can you give any advice?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say gender, there's no kind of research to show it does, but I would definitely say that every single person needs something different. But the principles are very similar, with having a sense of self-worth. I can send through, I've got this little scale I wrote. I can send it to the Fathering Project, and you can send it out for free to look at. The kids in Year 6 did it with me, and it was really illuminating what matters to them the most and what they can work on and what might be the areas that they could actually improve on and where I get my worth from. But it's the best thing I do is ask kids. So all my research is I ask people, what matters, what makes you feel like you matter? Tell me. And when you can have those conversations with your kids, like, when do you not matter? Like, what really makes you feel worthless? And then you can start to hook into them. And another thing that I didn't talk about is the 5 Languages of Love by Gary Chapman. I don't know if you have heard of that. It's an amazing book. Basically, we all feel loved in 5 different ways. So physical touch. So if your kids, it'll be a hug, a high five. Words, so I'm so proud of you, leaving a little note in their lunchbox, sending a letter. Quality time, so that's the kids, someone that follow you around all the time, they've got to be right next to you wherever you are, and so on. There's 5. So investing in them in that way, and then having a conversation with the kids as well. How do you feel encouraged by me? What do I do that encourages you? What do I do that makes you feel loved? So instead of making it a mystery, what we're doing is just working out what do they need, and then we give it to them. So I took this research and worked as a school psychologist for 3 years. I had this boy who was in Year 7 who was he was violent, he was stealing things. And I sat down with him and I talked about his worth and said, you know, I think you're worth something. And he's like, well, I don't. So I mentioned a few things that I thought were impressive about him, that he used his manners, that he let me walk in, you know, and I watched this kid just sit up, and he said to me, do you really believe that? And I said, I do. And because he hates psychologists, most people do. And he said, all right, I want to work with you then. And his mum rang me a few years later and said, his life changed forever. And it's that unconditional love from someone, and someone seeing that they've got value and then helping them to find that in themselves is the way it goes.
It's interesting around you making a comment around people don't like psychologists. Scott just came back about his son earlier who was connected to the Xbox more than people, and mentioned that he's seen a psychologist in the past but refuses to go back, said it doesn't work. So any suggestions for Scott there?
Yeah, I think I've got a good friend. She's awesome. I think you've got to sometimes, it's hard too when they're already in a bad place and they're vulnerable, and you take them and they give it a chance and it's not great. You need somebody who's going to be a little bit flexible. So maybe like someone who could meet them at a park and not go to an office, or someone who could come around and play Xbox with them first, or so maybe it's about calling around. And also, you know, it's hard when they're 18 too, because they're adult. I think at some point, like I would say to some kids that were really hard work for me, this is quite a powerful thing, is like, I love you so much that I'm going to do this because I care about you. And if I didn't care about you, I would let you stay where you are. And it doesn't have to be like full on drag them in, like don't drag kids anywhere. Someone at a school today did that, dragged the kid into the school. I was like, don't do that, that's not helpful. You just make them trust you less. But slowly exposing themselves and trying to get them like opportunities again, I would continue that. I would just keep saying to him, like, I do not want this life for you. And a really good thing too, when people are in a really dark place, is negotiation. All right, you've got to give me something. What's something you can do? Let's talk through some things, because you can't have this life as it is now. So what's one thing you can do to change your life with me? Partnership too.
Thank you. Is it ever too late, this is from Andrew, ever too late to build resilience in your life as a father?
Absolutely not, no. And it's funny because one of the students, a lot of my first and second year education students, they can't write particularly well. And I couldn't either growing up. And I had to teach myself to do my PhD and stuff. So there you go. If you can't write, you still can do a PhD. And one of the students came into me once, she'd failed the unit twice, and she's crying, and she said, Mandie, I tried so hard for you. And I was like, I know you tried hard. And I said, but what did you do differently? And she's like, well, nothing, I just tried. And I said, well, that's not changing anything. I got a guitar in the corner here, and I could sit in this room for days with my guitar and try harder and harder and harder, and I'll never be better at it. And sometimes we look at our bucket as like, well, that's our lot in life, and it's absolutely not. And I encourage you to go find good people. Go find people, go join a sports group or people that have values that you like, and go do a public speaking course, or go join a gym. Or that gym's not something I would do, but there's ways we can add to what we have and change our life. And I don't want anyone to think that your life is where it is now is what your life's going to be, you know, necessarily in a month's time or in a week's time. We can change it by adding stuff. Easy.
This one's from Dan. You made a good point about helping the child find value in themselves. Can you talk more about that? Any tips on facilitating that process?
Yeah, I could draw, couldn't I? Can I draw? I can. So if I draw on the screen. All right. So I draw this circle. I do two things. And I say to them, so I've done this with a few kids and it works amazing. I said, that's your life. And particularly maybe our 18-year-old example is I color in some of it and I'll say to them, this is the bad stuff in your life. Like, I'm super honest. I try to be the most encouraging, like looking for amazing things in people, but I'm also the most honest. Like, I think pretending with your kids, pretending with your colleagues and stuff, it's like when I hear people gossiping about other people and I'm like, go speak to them. Like, go, you know, like you're not being very supportive. So I say, these are all the things wrong and I'll name them. And the kids always agree with me because kids are quite honest. And then I say, see this white bit here? This is all the good part about you. And so it depends where they're at the whole sort of stage. And they all say to me, there's not very much good about me. And then again, you be the treasure hunter and you find things and you say, there's this, there's this, there's this. I'm proud of you. And I say to them, what my job is as a parent, as a teacher, as a psychologist, is to push some of this back and to remember more of the good, because if there's some bad stuff going on in their life. And so we start to explore some ways that we can do that. So that is giving them what I call insight to this. So one of the boys I did this with, he was like a street kid and he was in fights all the time. There's another one. And he came running in one day at lunchtime, he's year 7, and he's like, Mandie, these girls are teasing me on Google. I want to punch them. So he said, what should I do instead? So I said, well, you could try this, this, and this. And he's like, thanks, bye, and runs off. Because he had the revelation that I'm valuable after just this short conversation with this circle. And then he goes and invests in himself without me making him. And I always leave like a little bit of bad stuff there. And the other thing, I draw these sort of, so if that's me, very square, there's always negative in us. So I, on any day, can be, this is a good thing for kids to realize too, and for you as parents, I can be 20% bad on any given day. And some days I could be like, I don't know if bad's right, but 60% annoying. And that's the human condition, like to think that we should be perfect and think that we should make our lives like absolutely spotless. So it's accepting that we will make mistakes. That doesn't change our value. Another thing, talk to them about you do things, but those things are not you. So I might do an assignment and I might get a fail, but I'm not a fail. I just did something and that's what I got on it. I might try out for the basketball team and I don't get in. I'm not a fail, I have a go. My value doesn't change. And so having those conversations. I also draw, like, or talk about who do you want to be and who are you at the moment, and look at how do we get there? How do we invest in you further? But it's really, like, I watch kids flourish in my class, and it's just that constant, I value you, you're important to me. When I was working at a church once, I had about 100 kids come in the morning, little girls in their pink pretty dresses. First thing I'd say to them was, you look so pretty this morning. And one day I heard myself and I thought, that's the first thing they hear from you who was important in their life, that you're pretty. And I was like, oh my goodness, they're gonna think that that matters that much to me. And so I would say to them, I'm so happy that you're here today. I'm so glad you're here. You can say to your child, I'm so glad you're born, and talk about when they're born and, you know, how much better your family is, like that value of being born on purpose. And it's not that you don't say you're pretty or I'm proud of your academic stuff, but it's not our first point of call. Those things are actual extra stuff on top of it.
Actually, we've got a comment here from Seb that says, when my son suffers from anxiety, there's usually a lot going on in his head. We write a list and create some order and usually can solve a number of simple issues easily. We then create a plan to solve the more difficult issues. It seems to work for us.
That's perfect problem solving. And is it Seth?
Yeah.
It's perfect scaffolding. And what the gift you're giving your child there is that you're not saying you need to cope this way, because I remember doing that and I was like, you don't know what situation they're going to be in. So you might say you need to stand up for yourself, but then maybe there's a situation where they're in danger and they shouldn't stand up for themselves. They should get out of there. So when you take them through that process of writing it all down and then solving one and talking them through that solving problem, that's something they can use forever. The thing with anxiety too is when it's in our head, it's this loop that goes round and round and round. And what I talk to kids about, which again has worked really well, is it's like let's just say you can have a picnic, and are you going to invite the people that are mean to you to your picnic? And the kids are always like, well, no. And I say, well, it's interesting because when the negative thought comes into your head, you let that come in and you entertain that and you have a party with that. Because it's called rumination for adults, but the more they go over and over and over, the more it elevates their body, their anxiety systems, and then the more it gets entrenched in their head. So what you're doing too, Seth, is you're taking it out of their head, you're making it real, and it's not real. A lot of the fears are things that will never happen, but you're stopping that cycle in their head. And the fact that they can tell you that, that's amazing. So good job.
Coming up towards the end now, we've got just one final question. It's just around the age of starting to build resilience. It's from David. At what age do you think parents should start to focus on building their kids' resilience?
1. It's never too late, but straight away. They're like watching kids when they fall over and parents panic and pick them up and stress about it, and it's like you're teaching them that the world is scary. So like that kind of behavior then. And then I've had kids in grade 2 and 3 where their parents come in and sharpen their pencils and change their books for them. And again, you're saying, you're not competent, I need to do this for you. So there's those things along the way. And it's about that gradually skilling them up. And this is the hard bit for people, is letting them make mistakes, but in a safe kind of environment. So it's an ongoing thing from the beginning. But, you know, I've at times, say I've started a class and it's 3 or 4 weeks in, and I've kind of let things go, and I've like, oh, I feel uncomfortable with the rules we have here and it's not functioning. I'd have a family meeting, I have a class meeting, and I talk about it and I be honest. And one of the things kids love is when you want the best for them. So it's like, I want this family to be amazing, and I want you to be the most successful young person and adult in the world. Like, I want you to really flourish. And at the moment, this family's not working. And these are some of actually, I usually throw it to the kids because, again, they're very honest. What do you think's not working in the family? All right, what do you think we can do as a solution? What's some ideas here that we can switch things around? And so if you feel like your family's off course and your kids are off course and you kind of know what it is, bring your family together, throw it to them. I always think inspirational is the best, not like, I'm so sick of your behavior and you're driving your mother and I crazy. It's like, I love you, I care for you, I want you to have a really great life, and this is not working. let's talk about, and then I always offer myself out to, it's like, what can I do different? And we've got to be vulnerable to change and to taking feedback. And what can I do for you? What's something that I can stop doing? And, you know, we're changing. It's like who I am today, I am like a completely different person than who I was a year ago. And it's like, it's good for kids to see that you're vulnerable, you're learning, you're making mistakes, and you're growing, because that's life. It's forever. Resilience is not being perfect. It's getting up, feeling like you're worth investing in to fight the battle, and having the resources to get up and fight it.
Thanks, that's fantastic. We're drawing to a close now. I think one of the things that we will do is put up, if we can get from you, Mandie, the names of the books that you were recommending that were good, that would be useful for people to have a look at. We'll put that on the website tomorrow. We plan to put the video up, a recording of this webinar up on our website on the Fathering channel. Liz will talk about that a little bit in a moment, but if we can add the names of the books that are useful to read, then that would be useful for people to go to as a reference. So
I've also got some extended notes that you might like as well.
Okay, that's great. So we've got a couple of minutes. Is there anything you'd just like to finish with, or as a parting message for everybody?
I think that just the thing about don't try to be perfect, and that you're not what you are now. That's not your end point. And that I would really encourage you as parents to go find people that encourage you. Find good people. It's really hard doing life alone. So be really selective in who you connect with on that level.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and thank you too, on behalf of the Fathering Channel, the Fathering Project. I think I'm speaking on behalf of everyone tonight. It has been an extraordinary, insightful view from you tonight on life, and the importance of being positive and inspirational. I know I've learned so much as a mum of 3. I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story as part of the webinar tonight. It's truly been amazing. And wish you all the very best with your future career, and I'm sure we will look forward to welcoming you again sometime in the future. For all of those who have listened tonight, I'm sure you'll join with me in thanking Dr. Mandie Shean. And also, the webinar will be available tomorrow online. Please, if you have other people you think who would like to hear about this webinar or share it, please just send them the link. It's free, they can go and watch it. I'm sure you'd agree they'll get so much out of it. Looking forward next week, just to let you know, we do have some wonderful webinars and podcasts coming up. We've got Steve Bidoff next week on Friday on a podcast about raising girls. And we also have our senior researcher, Erin Ersek, who's going to be talking to us about why fathering matters and how you can positively impact your child's education. That's next Thursday night in this webinar session. So thank you all very much. Have a good weekend, travel safely, and we look forward to seeing you again and hearing from you on the Fathering Channel. Have a good night.